Now to the impact of the president cutting funding to 3 Central American countries while threatening to shut down the border with Mexico. The Wall Street Journal writing, most migrants don't want to wait years in Mexico, so they pay smugglers thousands of dollars to bus them to the border. Some have been ambushed by gunmen. All of this promotes the perception that the border is out of control and increases support for more restrictionist immigration policies, which should give Democrats a political incentive to fix the asylum loopholes. Joining me now is Mary Anastasia O'Grady. She's Wall Street Journal editorial board member and a columnist. You can catch her on Mondays, as I always do. The president deciding to end the aid to those 3 countries. What's the impact of that?
Well, you know, I think that it could work against the United States, particularly in Guatemala and Honduras, because in those countries you have center-right governments that basically are pro-American, and they're going to not have the same amount of funds, and so that's going to weaken them in the next election and so forth. On the other hand, I think that there's not a lot of evidence that this foreign aid is actually helping these countries. So I think the fact
and not helping us.
Right,
either.
Not helping us and not helping those. I mean, it's not doing anything to generate development. So what I would like to see, I'm not so much focused on whether or not the aid would be cut or not, but I think the U.S. should take a really good look at what policies it is promoting in these regions. And I know for a fact that the State Department in places like Guatemala and in Honduras has spent a lot more of its time focusing on things like equality of incomes, gay marriage, abortion. I mean, maybe those are things that a rich country can afford, but when a country is in development, it has to think about things like property rights, rule of law, low taxes, open markets. Those are the things that are economic the people in those embassies who deal with the economic policies in those countries should be promoting, and that has not happened.
This issue about the changing the asylum laws, and basically the Congress, if they wanted to, they could actually get this done in about a week or 2, if they had the will to do it. I know there's political things involved, but is that the issue, that we have the asylum laws that we have, and so people are coming up and they're coming with children that might not even be there. Sometimes they are, but we don't know that.
No, it's very important to change those laws. And if you notice in that editorial, we talked about how the courts in this country have overruled the president when he tried to discourage people from coming for asylum. Because if all you have to do is get to the border and claim asylum, and that gives you an automatic right to come in and then have a hearing at some later date, of course you're going to get this overwhelming number of immigrants. I mean, it's just common sense.
Can I ask you also about Venezuela? Just because we followed it, there was some activity initially, and then it's just sort of stagnated. And Jackson Deal at the Washington Post wrote this today, that there is no credible U.S. military option in Venezuela, very little chance that Trump would actually try one. The result is that the administration lacks a surefire means to bring about the regime change upon which it has staked considerable political capital and prestige. I wonder what you're hearing from the Venezuela side of things.
I don't think it's quite that clear-cut. I mean, that's definitely the narrative coming from Venezuelan expats who live in Washington. I think that we haven't given the sanctions enough time to work. I think the sanctions could be tightened so that they look more like what we've done in Iran than, right now they're just sort of targeted towards certain people. But, you could also stop oil from flowing to Cuba, which has a big incentive.
That would be a big deal.
Yeah, and I think that we could also send some more serious signals to Russia, as General Jack Keane has suggested, that we start telling them, you know what, there's a lot more we can do in Ukraine and Eastern Europe if you keep this up.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've tried all of that.
Any thoughts about shutting down the U.S.-Mexico border?
Well, I think that would work against us as much as it would. I mean, I understand the president's issue. I mean, to say this is not a crisis when you see the order of magnitude, I think is silly. But I think shutting down the border, given the fact that there are like second or third largest trading partner, it would actually, work against us in as much as it might help so-called solve this problem. A lot of these people are now trying to come through not legal ports of entry. So, what they want to do is spread these border guards out across those, those crossing points.
Right.
But I think a much better idea would be to get this change in the asylum law so you don't have that.
It just seems like that's so obvious, and I'm sure people are just frustrated with Washington. Like, get over yourselves politically, change the asylum law so that we can get a handle on it.
The Democrats like this chaos. They think it's a problem for Trump. They think it makes him look anti-Hispanic.
It's just not good for America or for those people.
Yeah.
There is a humanitarian crisis. We have the ability to fix it if we choose. Mary O'Grady, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dana.
So the Trump administration making one thing clear to the American people. The president is serious about these threats, so take him at his word, a point that was repeatedly made on the Sunday shows.
It certainly isn't a bluff. You can take the president seriously. This president is looking at the metrics. Secretary Nielsen saying we're in a meltdown, we're at the breaking point.
When the president says he's going to close the border, that is a totally unrealistic boast on his part.
The Democrats will not give us any additional money to do this. They won't give us any additional people. Faced with those limitations, the president will do everything he can. If closing the ports of entry mean that, that's exactly what he intends to do.
The president is calling a crisis at the border. He's threatening to shut down portions of it this week. He has given the order to cut off aid.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to stop it. It's totally absurd.
The president feels like that the only way to control this problem is to move the people from the port of entry to the ungoverned spaces where we need a wall. I will support him.
Well, that's the backdrop for Kevin Corke to begin a brand new week at the White House. Kevin, good morning to you. What are the politics behind the threat to close the border?
Well, frankly, Bill, the White House feels like this is a problem that's being facilitated by just a few countries south of our border. And what this really does is it underscores the enormity of that problem. And the president is calling this a, quote, invasion. Let me take it to Twitter. He's once again talking about it this morning. No surprise there. He said this: Democrats working with Republicans in Congress can fix the asylum and other loopholes quickly. We have a major national emergency at our border, all caps now. Get it done now. The numbers, frankly, Bill, are staggering, with Customs and Border Patrol reporting so-called asylum seekers overwhelming the system, in effect skipping the normal immigration process and jumping in front of the line ahead of tens of thousands who have been waiting and going through the proper process. White House officials and Republicans on Capitol Hill, for that matter, over the weekend, said the president has little choice but to act decisively.
What he's looking at is that 4,000 migrants apprehended in one day recently. We're on track this month for close to 100,000. We have never seen a surge like this.
What are we supposed to do? You have the Mexican government allowing thousands of people to walk all across Mexico. We've had 100,000 people cross the border illegally in March alone. We're on track to over 1 million this year if this keeps up. So Mexico could help more. They should help more.
El Salvador, Guatemala, as you mentioned, among the countries that will now not be receiving the aid that the president had previously earmarked for those particular countries. And by the way, while there's frustration here at the White House, especially as it's related to Democrats, Bill, keep in mind, Republicans did very little heavy lifting on this issue when they had control of both houses of Congress, Bill.
Interesting. What are Democrats saying? We heard from a few of them there about the latest policy announcement there.
Yeah, they are clearly frustrated because they know the president is going to get money to develop a wall. He's going to get the money by taking money from different pots. And that's frustrating for Democrats on Capitol Hill because while they know he will get money for the wall, it doesn't change, at least fundamentally, the immediate future of millions that are still making the dangerous trek to get here.
When the president says he's going to close the border, that is a totally unrealistic boast on his part. What we need to do is focus on what's happening in Central America, where 3 countries are dissembling before our eyes and people are desperately coming to the United States. The president's cutting off aid to these countries will not solve that problem.
There's another issue to consider here, Bill. Mexico would be severely impacted, at least potentially, if the border were shut down. As you look inside the numbers there, this from the Census Bureau, they are our 3rd largest trading partner. So this is something we'll have to keep an eye on. I should also point this out. We don't expect to see the president, at least on camera, before a prison reform event later on this afternoon. Should that change, I promise to let you know. But for now, back to you.
Good deal. Thank you, Kevin. Nice to see you beginning our coverage on a brand new week from the North Lawn. Thank you.